Correct. And you're trying to be like smooth here, where you think that you can differentiate acceleration from motion.
Yeah,
And
acceleration is acceleration is change in motion.
Okay, so you would have to substantiate that motion exists to prove that there is a change in the motion. So that would mean that based on Einstein's take, Foucault's pendulum and the gyroscope do not prove the Earth is moving. And again,
no,
in the
you
heliocentric paradigm, you cannot separate rotation and revolution because they both have to exist.
Acceleration is separate than motion, and so
it is not. You cannot explain the observations without it both rotating and revolving. If it's just rotating, it doesn't explain the observations.
Matthew, something can't accelerate without moving.
Acceleration causes movement. You're right.
Well, he's saying you can't prove the movement. So if you're saying, oh, well, we're just measuring the change in movement, he's saying you can't prove there is movement to measure a change in. So that refutes your point.
So you could measure the change in movement without knowing what the movement exactly is. You can see the change.
You don't have to know what it is. He's saying you can't verify that it is.
I don't agree with that part.
Can something be stationary and accelerating at the same time?
Yes.
How the fuck does that happen?
The top of a
But Matthew, this is a really bad ontological blunder, because you are trying to distinguish. You're trying to distinguish motion from acceleration,
right?
As though acceleration does not fall under the category of motion, when it does.
They're similar concepts, but they're separate. So what would you describe as happening at the very top of a parabola? If you shoot a cannonball straight up, and then it falls at the top of that parabola.
Fuck? Are we shooting cannonballs right now? What's going on?
It falls in midair, Matthew. It's moving the whole time. The change in direction doesn't mean that it stops moving.
It instantaneously does. There's like one moment in time where it's going up, and the next moment it's going down.
And it's not moving at that moment. At the moment it stops, it's stopped.
That's right.
Jesus Christ.
It's not moving. Exactly, dude. Ridiculous. But I just want to let you know, I understand that I have Stillman to your side. I can argue what you could say better, I think, because I've looked through all of this. I intellectually cornered you. There is no way out.
No, you didn't.
The only intellectually honest response you can have is to say, okay, well, we can't prove the Earth is moving, but I believe it is.
We can't prove the Earth is moving, but I believe we can show acceleration exists.
You can't show acceleration of the Earth if you can't show that the Earth is moving.
Yes, you can.
Matthew, let me ask you, were you taught this in school?
No, this is common sense based on physics, what I know of physics.
Oh, okay, Matthew, so you don't believe in Einstein?
That's a yes.
I believe that acceleration and motion are separate. Yeah.
If the bullet stopped at the top of the arc and is stationary there, then you don't believe in Einstein and you're following Newtonian perceptions of the inertial reference frame, because they have different inertial reference frames.
Slightly different, but on the scale of cannonballs.
They're radically different. In Einstein's models, the falling object that's free falling at 9.8 meters per second is stationary. In Newton's perception of the world, when the object is stationary on the ground, that's when it's stationary. So you're completely divorcing Einstein. You realize that?
I don't think Einstein has a concept of stationary, like a universal stationary. He says everything is relative. So you could use
it's a cop-out. Everything is relative is a cop-out. Real quick, Matthew, I just have a question, and it's rhetorical. Do you think the audience is buying any of what you're saying? Thanks.
The smart ones are, sure, yeah.
Okay, well, we're just going to keep... Okay, so far, the best he's got is that you can measure acceleration without something being in movement. And acceleration is the change in movement. So you're just patently wrong. Okay, so we're going to move on now. This is also Isaac Newton himself saying that the Earth could in fact be at rest and the center. he says, in order for the Earth to be at rest in the center of the system of the sun, planets, and comets, there is required both universal gravity and another force in addition that acts on all bodies equally according to the quantity of matter in each of them and is equal and opposite to the accelerative gravity with which the Earth tends to the sun, and thus celestial bodies can move around the Earth at rest. This is, of course, assuming the vastness of the distances and the vacuum itself, which is in contention, of course, from our side. The point is that Newton himself said that, yes, indeed, the Earth can be at rest and be in the center. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get into what really started all this, and that is Michelson-Morley. Michelson-Morley, they attempted to see, they assumed that there was an ether. They assumed that the Earth was spinning and revolving. And so they were going to detect a change based on different angles shooting with and against the ether. You'd be able to see a difference once the light patterns intersected. They would have a differentiation based on the motion and how long it took the light to get back. They found that there was just a very slight variation, but nowhere near what was needed for the Earth to be spinning. And this is why relativity had to be proposed, is to explain why you could not detect that. Okay, so here is physicist Henrik Lorentz discussing the Michelson-Morley. He said, briefly, everything occurs as if the Earth were at rest. Point blank here. And of course, he will come up in a second because they actually utilized his take to try to explain away the Michelson-Morley. Now, Matthew, are you familiar with Arthur Eddington?
I've heard that name, but I don't remember in which context.
Okay, so Arthur Eddington, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to, am I wrong, or did what you just read, isn't that Matthew's position?
What, everything occurs as if the Earth were at rest?
Yeah, like there's a specific point, like Matthew saying, like at the top of a parabola.
No, that doesn't. No.
There's a moment. That's not. Remember?
No. Lorentz is saying that everything occurs as if the Earth were at rest. This was his response to Michelson-Morley because he was a genius, an actual genius, and he was one of the fatherheads of electrical field theory, and he knew there had to be an ether because there has to be a medium to sustain propagation. So he never even entertained the idea that there was no ether because he wasn't insane, and you can't have a medium or you can't have something propagating nothing. So this is just Lorentz responding saying, clearly everything happens as if the Earth was stationary. So Arthur Eddington, Matthew, is the guy that allegedly helped to verify relativity with Einstein by looking or observing a star from behind an eclipse. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yes, I've heard of this. They knew an eclipse was coming and they knew where the stars should be, and they were going to see if there was any gravitational lensing.
To this day, this is one of the only claimed evidences for relativity. But actually within your paradigm, they say that it's still based on refraction. Just that space and time bend and warp and cause the refraction. You realize that, right?
No, I would say refraction is different than gravitational lensing.
No, it's actually not. It's the same exact effect. You're just claiming a different cause, but it's the same effect of refraction.
Oh, so yeah. Anyway, I get it. They would call them different things, but they work sort of the same way, but they're completely different processes that cause it.
But exactly the same effect. You have to presuppose the cause. And so that doesn't actually prove it. That's correlation and causation. Like if I say, oh, man, the sun rises every time the rooster crows. So the rooster crowing must make the sun rise. And then you remove the rooster and then the sun still rises. That's correlation and causation, right? So anyway, here's Arthur Eddington himself. Again, one of these are infamous people from your paradigm. Arthur Eddington, this is about Michelson-Morley. There was just one alternative. The Earth's true velocity through space might happen to have been nil. So when you hear the globe earthers say, no, all Michelson-Morley did was debunk the ether, there was no other option. And then you say, no, they had the option of maintaining the ether, which was the actual foundation for all electromagnetic theory. Sorry, I got a call. From all electromagnetic theory, or so they were either throwing away the ether or throw away the assumption that the Earth spins and revolves. That was the paradigm. Do you agree with that? They had to make
Right.
that decision.
No, I see. This Michelson-Morley shows that if relativity doesn't exist, then it shows that the box that they did the experiment in was not in motion, because basically they're looking at the round trip speed of light at right angles to see if there's any difference, and they didn't find any difference.
Okay, so yeah, and my point is that the Glober's script that they say is, that didn't show that the Earth wasn't moving at all. It just proved that ether doesn't exist. They didn't detect anything. The truth is that they did detect something. It just wasn't nearly as much as was needed for the Earth to be spinning and revolving in a stationary ether, specifically. Okay, but my point is, here's Arthur Eddington telling you clearly we were faced. This was before relativity, right? Clearly, we are faced with a paradigm where the Earth could just be at rest. Okay, so I'm making a point here that the Globers just lie on the internet. That's what they do. They lie on the internet. So here's another one. This is another famous physicist Wolfgang Pauli. The failure of the many attempts to measure terrestrially any effects of the Earth's motion. He then goes on to say, to explain how the mathematics of relativity are used to explain away this inability to prove that the Earth's in motion. So this is another famous physicist telling you that you cannot measure any effect of the Earth's motion terrestrially. Any effect of the Earth's motion that would include acceleration. Wouldn't it, Matthew?
Acceleration is separate from motion. What do you mean any effect? I would say like the optical effect, or even like swinging pendulums.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So that's the main point here is in 2022, all the Globers have to prove, quote unquote, that the Earth is in motion is Foucault's pendulum and the ring laser gyro, or mechanical gyros. And here is once again a very infamous physicist telling you you cannot use those to measure the motion. Okay,
and I agree with that. The Foucault's pendulum does not prove motion. Ring laser gyros does not prove motion. Even mechanical gyros doesn't prove motion. None of those things have any indication of motion.
Yeah, and we all know you're trying to differentiate motion and rotation, and that's not how this works. Because in the heliocentric paradigm, to explain the observations, the Earth has to both rotate and revolve. In order to have acceleration, you must be in motion. But we're not going to keep saying this over and over. If that's where you're staking your flag, go for it. Okay.
That is where I'm staking my flag, that motion and acceleration are different things.
But can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
When you say it's not proof, would you say that it's evidence?
Not
you.
No.
Not you.
Oh, I see what you're asking. Yeah, I would say that those experiments do not say one way or the other, yes or no, whether there is motion. It doesn't prove that there's not motion, but it doesn't prove.
And it's not evidencing motion either, right?
Right.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to know.
Okay, here is the physicist that Einstein stole a lot of his work from. And when I say stole, I mean, yeah, because modern times we all attribute it to him and he didn't really give him proper credit. But this is openly acknowledged and known. This is not some type of conspiracy. Henry Poincaré was the foundation for majority of relativity. He said, we do not have and cannot have any means of discovering whether or not we are carried along in a uniform motion of translation. So you agree that there's no way to prove that the Earth is in uniform motion.
Right. That's maybe that's a better way of explaining what I was saying before about the gyroscopes and the pendulums. This do not show uniform. Yeah. This is talking about uniform motion.
That's right. Okay, so we can never prove that the Earth is going around the sun.
This is talking about whether you're going in a straight line uniform motion.
This is talking about the Earth having uniform motion of translation around the sun.
Around the sun would be circular, and that's not uniform.
Okay, so what's he talking about then?
He's talking about like just trying to measure a straight line speed of something. Like uniform motion is not undergoing acceleration. Something that's undergoing acceleration is not uniform. So he's talking about, that idea if something that's in motion stays in motion unless it's acted on by a force. And he's saying once it's in motion, you can't tell if something is being carried along or not.
Do we accelerate in our orbit?
We do.
Okay, so then whenever you said that Einstein was actually wasn't talking about acceleration, well, he says that you can't detect the motion of the Earth in space. So what's going on there?
They were clearly talking about motion.
But if the motion of the Earth in space is supposedly entails acceleration, then why is Einstein saying you can't prove the motion of the Earth in space then?
Because he was not looking at acceleration; he was looking at motion.
Do you think Einstein didn't understand that anything in a circular orbit would also accelerate?
He did understand that, yes.
Okay, so why did he say you can't prove the Earth's in motion in space then?
Because he was talking about motion. He wasn't talking about acceleration. He was
talking about something that didn't even exist in his paradigm that he was trying to explain. That's your argument?
No, he understood first semester physics and was clear to distinguish what he meant. And so that's why he used motion instead of acceleration.
So you're saying when he said you can't detect the motion of the Earth in space, he was talking about something that doesn't actually happen?
No, motion does happen. Acceleration happens. He says that you cannot detect motion, but
you can detect the acceleration.
He didn't mention the acceleration. Do you have any quotes where he talks about acceleration?
Well, that's the whole point. You can't have acceleration without verifying and substantiating the motion part.
That is not true.
Oh, how are you going to measure acceleration without motion?
They're separate concepts, and there's ways of measuring motion. There's ways of measuring acceleration, like springs provide acceleration, for example. Not that there's a spring, but there's lots.
But how can you have acceleration without motion?
Exactly. The top of a parabola.
How do you measure acceleration without motion?
Depending on what is causing the force, you can figure out the size of the force.
How?
Yeah,
using how much a spring is deformed, how much gravity is, how far away things are to the force of gravity. What depends on what force you're talking about.
So the object can accelerate without moving.
There is a moment in time at the top of a parabola where a cannonball is not in motion, but it is still accelerating.
How could you prove it's accelerating if it's not moving?
Well, just from a photograph you couldn't, but you have to look over time. So
over time, even the motion.
Right? Yeah.
Well, even before you try to prove it, explain to me, because this notion is incoherent. How is something accelerating without moving?
It is moving. It's just that there's a moment in time where it might not be moving. So if you're talking about an instantaneous moment in time,
so then it has no acceleration or deceleration. Matthew, listen. Right now, over the last 5 or 6 times that Whitsitt has tried to clarify for you what's going on here, this is what you're saying: motion isn't motion.
No, I'm saying acceleration.
Well, no, because they're the same fucking thing, dude.
Really?
Get over it.
All right. Well, Matthew, in your example, isn't it your point that it's actually not moving in that particular instance?
So anything that, say you throw something,
when it reaches the nexus point, it's not moving. Is that your point? Yes or no?
That's my point. Yes.
Right. But not but. So
no,
in his example, right. I'm saying that this is the thing. In your example, Matthew, you're picking a moment in which nothing is actually moving. Well, in that case, right, it would just be not movement.
Right. I'm using that to distinguish between acceleration, even though in that moment it's not moving.
So in the sense that it's not moving in that moment, since this is your example, in the moment that it's not moving, how would you pick up a reading on it moving? Only in that moment that it's not moving, how would you validate that it's moving when it's not?
Just in one moment, you can't. You'd have to look at time. So you're right. Just one moment. Like you take a snapshot, you can't tell if it's moving.
Matthew, you're not paying attention to the reductio ad absurdum Elijah just told you. You're trying to appeal to a moment of no motion to try and argue the Earth is moving.
No, to try and argue that motion and acceleration are separate concepts. That's all I meant.
But that's your red herring in your attempt to defend the notion the Earth is moving.
Exactly.
It's also non sequitur.
All the flat earthers can see, just so you can see. This is where they have to go, is either here or just hand wave dismissal. It's point blank absurdity. You can't have acceleration without motion. You can't measure acceleration without something moving. You can't validate the Earth is moving according to Einstein, Poincare, Arthur Eddington, and many more that we're going to bring up. These are people that quoted far after the gyro, the mechanical gyro, and Foucault's pendulum, which is to this day all the globe earthers have. Okay, so use their own paradigm against them. Make them say that Einstein was a genius, but he was also incompetent.
So Matthew, when something is not in motion, is it accelerating?
Sometimes it is and sometimes not.
Give an example.
If you throw something up in the air, let's say that you launch it and it's up in the air for 4 seconds. It goes up and then for 2 seconds, then it slows down, turns around, and then falls down. That whole 4 seconds, it's undergoing acceleration. But if you shoot it straight up, that one moment halfway in between there at second 2,
yeah, well, there's no motion. There's no acceleration.
No motion.
Yeah, no acceleration. So you debunked yourself. Do you realize that?
During the whole 4 seconds, there is acceleration, including
you're not
one
talking
moment.
About that. You're talking about the moment where there's no motion and then claiming there's acceleration there. That's retarded, Matthew. Do you realize that?
That's why we should only give this a few more minutes, because Matthew, answer his question.
Yes, I am saying that in that moment, at 2 seconds, there is no motion, but there is still acceleration happening.
Can I rebut that?
No, you can't. It's simple physics.
Well, no. I mean, you said it, and I would like to rebut it, and then you can let whoever's listening.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So you know how you are accelerating, and then you slow down, right? Like in a car, you're accelerating, but then you're decelerating at some point, right?
Right. In physics, we don't.
So if you're going to, but I'm talking about reality, and so in reality, when something slows down, it's decelerating. If you were to shoot something up, it would be accelerating, and then in reference to how much acceleration it had at its maximum, when it slows down, we would classify that as deceleration. Now, there's going to reach the point where you're saying there's no movement, which that acceleration is zero. Ergo, no acceleration.
If Einstein was talking about how you can't measure the motion of the Earth, but it's supposedly always accelerating, then why would he even say that?
Because, I mean, I don't know how many other ways to say that acceleration and motion are different, and you guys choose not to believe me.
Why talking about motion, though?
Because they were curious about whether you could see how fast the Earth was moving, like to understand like sort of a raw speed.
So, like, to determine sort of a what?
A raw speed according to some sort of like universal reference frame, something like that. And they determined it's not possible.
Wait. Is there something different than a raw speed? Like, it's either a speed or it's not a raw speed. Is there like
sort of a
universal,
a universal speed of the universe or something.
No, man.
That would be begging the question.
Is the Earth ever not accelerating?
No, the Earth is always accelerating.
So he would be trying to determine something that never happened. That's your claim?
No, he would be trying to find the motion, the speed of the motion.
But that doesn't exist.
But I thought,
according to you.
Didn't he just defeat himself? Wait.
Yes.
No, motion.
Yeah, like
motion
4
and
times.
acceleration
But there's also, because they like to compartmentalize all this stuff. But
yeah, actually, that's how the world works.
No, because then the word nuance wouldn't exist. So that's not how the world works, Matthew. Right or wrong? Before I continue.
No, there is nuance. Right.
Right.
An amazing thing Matthew just said. Talk about atomism. Go ahead.
But thank you though, Matthew. So damn, what was I about to say before? What was I saying when he interrupted?
Because
that's all I said. Damn, that's all I got to say.
Are you supposed to be the smartest person in your family?
Okay. What he said. Okay, so in response to acceleration, now isn't it that the argument is there is no acceleration and that's why we can't detect movement?
No.
No, I'm asking everyone else who's literally came here arguing that the reason that we can't detect movement is because it's not accelerating. Sort of like if you're going the same speed or the same velocity in a train. In fact, I'm pretty sure you've made that argument, but maybe in a plane.
Who are you addressing?
I don't know, but I just fake spit out my tobacco like I made a good point.
You did.
And spit.
Yeah, he did. Matthew, have you not argued that that a plane is traveling in a linear direction and therefore you don't feel any motion?
Well, I like the example of the train, and that's what Galileo actually used an example of a boat. If it's nighttime and it's super dark outside and you're in a train, it's kind of hard to tell whether you're going 30 miles an hour or 60 miles an hour.
Yeah,
Galileo disavowed heliocentrism a year before he died.
That's false.
No, it's not false.
Yeah, neither of you know that, by the way.
No, it is.
Oh, that's right.
Actually, they found out that in fact the guy tried to come present evidence of motion to him, and he sent this huge letter refuting it. And then the guy erased Galileo's name.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like he wrote a letter to make people happy. I think he never stopped believing it himself.
Oh, so this is what we're always found with. I think they actually did this. I think what Einstein was doing was actually this. I think not what they say, but what you think. So we have the actual writings from special and general theory of relativity that says you cannot detect the motion of the Earth terrestrially. We have Glober saying, well, he didn't really mean that, but yet you can never find a quote from Einstein where he says you did prove the motion of the Earth or the acceleration of the Earth or that you can detect it. And he never claimed that, ever. So you're just making it up. I've looked for 2 days. He never said it. He never said the motion of the Earth, whether that's rotation or revolution, has ever been substantiated. He specifically said the opposite.
And
at this point, Matthew, do you think you know more than Witsit about this? At this point,
I do, actually.
Oh wow! Holy shit! The hubris here.
No, he's
hold on, Matthew.